When world leaders travel abroad, the headlines usually focus on politics, a summit, a speech, a diplomatic handshake, but sometimes a trip raises a different kind of question, not because of where a leader goes, but because of who goes with them. When Donald Trump traveled to China, accompanied by some of America's most influential business leaders, observers around the world noticed something unusual. This was not just a delegation of politicians, it was a gathering of corporate power, technology executives, investment leaders, manufacturing decision-makers, people whose choices influence trillions of dollars in economic activity. And that sparked an important question. What happens when the interests of governments and the interests of major corporations converge in the same room? Because behind the public statements, behind the photographs and official ceremonies, another story may have been unfolding. A story about economic competition, industrial power, global supply chains, and the future direction of the world economy. The meeting may not have been about a single trade dispute or a temporary political disagreement. It may have reflected something much larger, a recognition that the global economic system is entering a new era, and both the United States and China are trying to determine what comes next. For decades, the relationship between America and China helped shape modern globalization. The arrangement appeared straightforward. American consumers purchased products, Chinese factories manufactured them, corporations expanded across international borders, investors chased growth opportunities, governments benefited from rising economic activity. The system was not without tensions, but it created one of the largest periods of economic expansion in modern history. Over time, however, the balance began to change. China's economy grew dramatically, its industrial capabilities expanded, its technological ambitions increased. Its influence in global trade became impossible to ignore. At the same time, concerns within the United States started growing. Questions emerged about manufacturing jobs, supply chain dependence, strategic industries, technological leadership, and economic security. What once looked like a partnership increasingly began to resemble a competition. Today, the relationship between the world's two largest economies is defined by both cooperation and rivalry. They remain deeply connected, yet they are also competing for leadership in industries that will define the future. Artificial intelligence, advanced manufacturing, semiconductors, energy systems, robotics, critical minerals. The stakes are enormous, because leadership in these sectors may influence economic power for decades to come. Many people think economic competition is primarily about tariffs, but tariffs are often only the visible part of a much larger story. The deeper battle is about production. Who builds the factories? Who develops the technology? Who controls the supply chains? Who attracts investment? Who creates the jobs of the future? Economic power is not simply measured by stock markets or GDP figures. It is measured by the ability to produce, to innovate, to manufacture, to adapt. Throughout history, nations that controlled critical industries often gained significant advantages over their competitors. The Industrial Revolution transformed Britain. The manufacturing boom helped establish American economic dominance during the 20th century. Technology helped create entirely new centers of power in the modern era. Today, another transition appears to be underway. And that is why meetings involving major business leaders matter, because governments can establish goals, but businesses often determine whether those goals become reality. A government can announce support for manufacturing. A corporation decides where factories will be built. A government can encourage innovation. A company decides where research and development investments go. A government can promote economic growth. Private industry determines how much capital gets deployed. This creates an important reality. The future economy will not be shaped solely by politicians. It will also be shaped by the executives, investors, engineers, and entrepreneurs making decisions behind the scenes. The presence of major corporate leaders at international meetings reflects a shift in how economic power operates. In earlier eras, governments controlled many of the most important assets. Today, some of the world's most influential technologies are developed by private companies. Some of the largest investment pools are managed by private institutions. Some of the most critical innovations emerge from corporate research laboratories. As a result, the line between economics and geopolitics has become increasingly blurred. Technology firms influence national competitiveness. Manufacturers affect strategic resilience. Investment firms help determine where capital flows. Infrastructure companies shape long-term development. The decisions made by these organizations can influence employment, productivity, innovation, and growth. This is why governments increasingly engage directly with business leaders when discussing international economic strategy. Because the future is not only being negotiated through diplomacy, it is also being built through investment. One of the most important developments of the 21st century is the restructuring of global supply chains. For years, efficiency was often the highest priority. Companies searched for the lowest costs. Production became increasingly globalized. Goods crossed multiple borders before reaching consumers. The system generated tremendous benefits, but it also created vulnerabilities. Disruptions exposed weaknesses. Geopolitical tensions highlighted dependencies. Governments began reconsidering how much of their economic future should rely on distant supply networks. As a result, countries around the world started investing more heavily in domestic production. Industrial policy returned to public debate. Manufacturing became a strategic priority. Economic resilience became as important as efficiency. This shift is affecting nearly every major economy, and it is creating a new competition for investment, talent, technology, and production capacity. Perhaps nowhere is this competition more visible than in technology. Artificial intelligence is transforming industries. Advanced chips are becoming essential infrastructure. Data is increasingly viewed as a strategic resource. The countries and companies that lead these fields could gain significant economic advantages. This is one reason why technological competition has become such a central issue between major powers. Control over critical technologies influences more than profits. It influences productivity, national security, economic growth, and geopolitical influence. The race is not simply about creating the next breakthrough. It is about determining who benefits most from the transformation that follows. The winners may shape entire industries. The losers may spend years trying to catch up. Throughout history, major transitions often appear gradual while they are happening. People living through them rarely recognize their full significance. Only later does the pattern become obvious. Factories relocate. Investment priorities shift. New industries emerge. Old assumptions disappear. Eventually, an entirely new economic landscape takes shape. Today, there are signs that another transformation may be occurring. Governments are rethinking industrial strategy. Corporations are reassessing supply chains. Investors are searching for long-term opportunities. Technology is reshaping productivity. Artificial intelligence is altering labor markets. Global competition is intensifying. Taken individually, these developments may seem unrelated. Viewed together, they reveal a larger story. The architecture of the global economy is evolving, and meetings involving political leaders and powerful executives may provide clues about where that evolution is heading. The most important conversations in the world do not always happen in front of cameras. Sometimes they happen in conference rooms, behind closed doors, far from public attention. The headlines may focus on a diplomatic visit. The photographs may capture handshakes and ceremonies, but beneath the surface, larger forces are often at work. Economic power, technological leadership, industrial strategy, investment decisions. These forces shape the world long after the news cycle moves on. Whether this particular trip ultimately proves historic remains to be seen. But one thing is clear: the competition between major powers is no longer defined solely by military strength or political influence. It is increasingly defined by who can build, innovate, invest, and adapt faster than everyone else. And in that contest, the decisions made today may help determine the balance of economic power for decades to come. If you enjoy documentaries that go beyond the headlines and explore the deeper forces shaping economics, technology, and global power, subscribe to the Macro Lens, because the biggest changes in history rarely arrive with a warning. They begin quietly, and by the time everyone notices them, the world has already changed.